Aya, take these. I'm sure you'll know what to do with them.
Onechanbara. It's one of those rare enigmas in gaming. A totally niche Japanese budget title designed to be a cheap cash grab that has not only survived, but has thrived and grown over the decades. Onechanbara Origin is the latest entry in the surprisingly long-running Onechanbara franchise, developed by Tamsoft and published by D3. Commemorating the 15th anniversary of the series, Onechanbara Origin is a remake of the first two games, retelling of the events from the Onechanbara and the Onechanbara 2. And since it's no longer running on a potato, the graphics have been modernized with a new art style, some of the series' best combat, and all of the insanity we've come to love. So what in the world is Onechanbara? Well, the title is a play on two Japanese words, Onechan, meaning big sister, and Chanbara, meaning sword fighter. So, big sister sword fighter? Yep, checks out. Onechanbara Origin is an unapologetically over-the-top hack-and-slash game, with a main character who wears, well, this, a combat system that's way better than it has any right to be, and violent goodness throughout. With blood, boobs, and babes, Onechanbara has sliced its way into the hearts of a small but passionate fanbase, though it's been on a journey to broaden its appeal by relying less on the fan service alone and more on a fun overall experience, with Origin taking us the furthest down this path yet.
Saki? It seems aren't that tasty.
Now, if you've never played an Onechanbara game before, you may be asking whether you can jump straight into Origin. And the answer is absolutely yes, for two reasons. First, as the name would suggest, this is an origin story, and there's no better place to start than the beginning. And second, the story's about as deep as your mom, and can be skipped without impacting the experience, like it all. For longtime fans, you'll appreciate seeing how the bare-bones and clunky stories of two sisters locked in a deadly struggle from the first two games have been hot glued together to be a more cohesive and compelling tale. Anyway, zombies are running rampant in an apocalyptic Japan. Here we meet half-sisters Aya and Saki, who've been estranged since childhood. Aya was raised by her father, who trained her in the way of the katana, and Saki was raised by her mother, who trained her in her fighting style. Saki always resented her father and older half-sister after the family split when she was young. When Saki's mother Tsubaki was killed, she was driven to the brink of madness, turning her long resentment into a burning rage, and sending her on a path of vengeance against Aya and their father. Okay, with this setup you're likely expecting a deeply emotional story, with complex relationship dynamics, maybe a murder mystery trying to find the real killer, just you and OJ, all set against the zombie apocalypse backdrop, which no doubt serves as an allegory for holding onto pain that eats you up inside. Or maybe not. While some of these elements may be there, it's really up to you to fill in the depth. The scenes are only loosely tied together, with twists that both come out of nowhere and are also totally predictable. The story is little more than an excuse to have you killing more zombies. It follows the Suda51 school of not caring at all about how over the top it is, which is for the best. While it does have a lot of story moments, maybe too many, you can pretty safely ignore most of it. After all, you're here for the carnage, and thankfully, it's frickin' rad. The gameplay is all about fast, flashy action, feeling like Devil May Cry and Dynasty Warriors had a baby, and that baby wears a bikini. You'll slice and dice your way through the linear stages until your path gets blocked off, and then
It's clobbering time!
You'll shred through wave after wave of the undead, killing everything in sight, at which point the path opens up, letting you move forward to the next combat area. Rinse and repeat. As you defeat enemies, they'll drop orbs, which act as both experience points and money. You'll get a grade at the end of each stage for your performance based on your combos and how long you took. The highest rank is V for violent, so you'll be hunting for the V as per usual. Based on how well you did, you'll get points that you can apply to health, strength, and defense. You'll also gain new moves and combos. After completing a chapter, you can always revisit it to try increasing your rank. Onechanbara has always featured hack-and-slash combat, but the depth, polish, and spectacle has been ramped up over the past few entries. Origin is among the most refined in the series, rivaling those heavy hitters like Bayonetta. Now, to be clear, it never quite reaches that pinnacle, but it's way closer than you'd expect. You build combos by mixing up light and heavy attacks, directional inputs, jumping, dodging, and parries, which are called predicts. A perfect dodge slows down time, and rocking that predict just right can knock an enemy on their ass. During this window, you can rip them to shreds with a cool finisher. And yes, that's actually what it's called. By landing successful hits, predicting, and dodging, you'll fill the ecstasy gauge. When full, you can pull off an ecstasy combination, which is an instant bloody death for most enemies. Hell yeah. Combat always looks great, even when just mashing buttons, but you're encouraged to master timing, dodging, and predicting. Early on, I found myself dodging a lot more than predicting due to the generous invincibility frames. Though after a few hundred deaths, I started to get the feel for predicting, letting me take enemies out with the old 1, 2, 3. Everything feels solid from the start, but as you level up, get more moves, and actually get good, it really starts to feel great, turning into a ballet of babes and blood. It's awesome. Okay, so you need to reload your sword. Yeah, this will be familiar to series veterans. As you carve your way through the enemy onslaught, you and your sword will get progressively covered in blood, making it less effective. So, what do? Well, like any badass would, you do this. It's so strangely satisfying whipping the blood off in between attacks, or after a hard-fought battle. Blood plays a big role in the game. Not only is it central to the story, but as you get covered in enough of the stuff, filling your stain gauge, you'll go berserk, making you stronger and faster, but with less defense. Keep indulging your bloodlust, and you'll reach the ultimate ecstatic form. Here, you take on a demon form, where you're even stronger and faster, but there's a catch. Your health will rapidly deplete as long as you aren't attacking. Each hit you land will give you a little health back, driving you to be as aggressive as possible in this form. You'll constantly be trying to go berserk, and thankfully, it's not all that hard. Everything, and I mean everything, bursts into a red fountain of blood and guts, and the more you kill, the more blood splatters all over the screen and you filling this gauge, until you go berserk once again. Aya fights alone at the start of the game, but soon enough, Saki joins her to fight by her side. You can also unlock a third character that I won't spoil. Aya and Saki each have 2 sets of weapons. Aya can swap between single or double katanas, and Saki uses a longsword and knuckle dusters. All of this variety adds a lot of depth with the ability to instantly swap between characters and weapons, letting you extend combos between characters or swapping to an unbloodied weapon when in the heat of battle. Also, when not in control, characters regain health, so swapping can also be a way to extend their life. The action often feels like a Muso game. Think of Persona 5 Strikers, where you're up against literally hundreds of enemies at a time. So it's no surprise you'll see a lot of the same enemy types repeated. However, there's enough enemy variety to keep things interesting. Starting with the fodder zombies. They're melee focused and pretty easy to dispatch, only ever becoming a challenge through sheer numbers. Cops and military zombies use weapons like pistols, shotguns, knives, and even miniguns to turn your insides to your outsides. Mix in the mudmen, who can't be hurt with normal attacks. First you have to stun them or go berserk to take them out. And that's not to mention the packs of dogs or big brutes just waiting to turn you into a fine paste. Each of these enemies have a red variant that's faster and stronger. It's best to take them out first since they can quickly wreck you. Most mobs are easy enough to take down once you figure out any specific weaknesses, often coming in the form of predicting attacks to stun enemies for a short period of time. Now the bosses are a real highlight. They feel like a puzzle to solve, each with their own gimmicks requiring more strategy and timing. They usually telegraph major attacks from a mile away, but it's always so satisfying predicting the attacks from a beast that's 5 times your size, knocking them off their feet. An early fight against two sisters show this game isn't messing around, but my favorite has to be against Death Bear, a former circus clown turned rabid zombie bear. Freaking love it. Outside of combat, exploration is nearly non-existent. Don't expect to search nooks and crannies for goodies. Most levels are a single corridor, other than the occasional obvious side room with a goddess statue. Approaching these will fill your health and reduce your stain gauge. You'll find some items by breaking open a box or barrel, but you can completely ignore this and it would almost have no impact on the game. That's not to say items are useless, far from it, but you can buy them at any time from the store in the pause menu using all of the orbs you've been collecting. Here, you can buy 2 different types of items, gems and rings. Gems are single-use items like health or a temporary speed boost, and rings provide a whole host of passive buffs as long as they're equipped. Each character can equip 3 at a time, and there's a boost to their effect if both characters have the same one equipped. The benefits can range from simple things like increased item or orb drops, which I recommend getting as early as possible, to much more interesting, like going permanently berserk. The noticeable impact to gameplay always makes these rewarding to collect, which is good considering some cost tons of orbs. Try upwards of 1 million. Yeah. Now some are available right away and others you'll need to unlock by defeating bosses or completing various quests. And that's really what Onechanbara Origin is about. Carving up zombies like a Christmas turkey, getting stronger, and carving them up some more. While hacking through wave after wave can get repetitive, it's oddly cathartic, especially with the continual progression. That being said, all things are not perfect. The biggest issue is the nearly broken camera. You'll feel like it's constantly fighting you. I haven't struggled with a camera this much since Senran Kagura Burst Renewal. But there's an enemy lock-on, this should fix this, I hear you say. Well, not so fast. You know how in tons of games you can lock onto enemies and easily switch between enemies when needed? Well, that's not how it works here. I don't know why, but using the bumpers for the lock-on just never felt right, though that's not my problem. My problem is that after locking onto an enemy, you can't just switch enemies using the stick. Oh, no. Now you can click the stick to change it, but it only changes to the enemy directly in front of you, which may not be the one you actually want to lock onto. And with all of the enemies trying to eat your face, this lack of control can be a real hassle in the heat of the moment. So you'll have to choose between fighting with the camera or fighting with the lock-on. And the other issue isn't so much a problem with the game itself, but more so in comparison to Z2 Chaos. Since this is a remake of the first 2 games, it's somewhat limited by what was in those games, which was really just a story about the 2 sisters. Z2 Chaos had 4 protagonists that you could switch between, which added a ton more variety to the gameplay. So while Origin feels like a step backward to me when compared to its predecessor, it's a minor gripe in the grand scheme. The visuals in Origin are one of the biggest changes from past titles and likely to be the most controversial to longtime fans. Instead of continuing to wrestle with the somewhat realistic visuals and the limited budget, Tamsoft went for a full cel-shaded art style. The older games had a certain grimy charm, but have aged about as well as fine milk. And while I personally prefer the visual style of Z2 Chaos, it's undeniable the overall visual package will age far better here. Designer Katsumi Inami has breathed new life into the character designs, and with the sharper models and improved animations, they look more expressive than ever. Environments have always been bare bones and are now also very bare bones, still feeling more like arenas for combat instead of actual places. The trade-off with the simple environments is a rock-solid frame rate, which is a must for a fast-paced action game like this. The color palette is bright and vibrant with improved lighting and effects, making for a visually striking experience that'll appeal to a wide audience. Though it's somewhat like Times Square becoming family friendly, when it should give you herpes just by sitting on a bench. Yeah, that probably still happens actually. Don't get me wrong, the visuals are actually great, but it's just a bit more sanitized, and that includes muting some of the series' signature fan service. It's not a kid's game, far from it, but the gratuity has been toned down, as has been the trend, particularly on PlayStation consoles over the past few years. This is the second game in the series with English voice acting, and I was really impressed with how great the acting was, conveying a range of emotions. But what stood out to me was how strong and confident the heroines are, which I appreciated. Yes, they're wearing skimpy outfits, but they're not vapid caricatures. Like Bayonetta, they're confident and determined.
Take your sorrow away!
Even cramming the first two game stories into this one, the game's short, like 4 hours for my first time through. However, the game's designed around replayability, unlocking harder difficulties and bonus missions, like Infinite Survival Mode, which reminds me of the Bloody Palace mode in Devil May Cry. By clearing 100 floors, you'll unlock the third playable character. You can also unlock her by paying real money, of course. The quests also make a return, which are basically objectives that you can complete in or out of the story mode to unlock extra content like artwork, music, or rings to be purchased at the shop. In going through the story all beefed up with some of the high-level rings, just wrecking fools that used to be a real challenge, is the type of power fantasy I need in my life. To do everything, including playing through each of the harder difficulty modes, will take around 20 to 25 hours. And just like Z2 Chaos, I had a blast the entire time. Okay, so how was Origin received? Well, pretty well. It received a 69 on Metacritic. Nice. And received Famitsu's Gold Award with a score of 32 out of 40. But it didn't sell all that well, and I'm not all that surprised. Simplifying the combat, changing the art style, and toning down the fan service isn't likely to win over the series fans. And while the appeal may be wider than past titles, it still won't appeal to the mainstream, leaving us with only questions about the future of the franchise. Though it's likely this will be the latest game for quite some time. Onechanbara Z2 Chaos is still my favorite game in the series. I was so blown away with the significant leap in depth that the game brought with it. However, Origin is a close second. It carries forward the great combat from its predecessor, but has really been an exercise in refinement. If you're already a fan of Onechanbara, you've either played this game already or don't need a reason to. But if you're not, this game could turn you into one. From the simple, satisfying combat and game loop, to the over-the-top set pieces, and of course, the fan service, there's no shortage of things to love. This won't rival Platinum's greatest works, but if you're a lover of fast, flashy action with beautiful heroines and tons of blood, you owe it to yourself to see why this series has survived for so long.